And of course, right when I start the recording, there is an airplane that's going by.
I can't hear it on this end
Oh,
at all.
good. Perfect. Awesome. Okay. I'm Lisa Kastner. I'm here with Tomas, and we are here with 20 questions. So I'm just going to ask 20 random questions. At least they seem random to me, and of Tomas, and we'll see what he comes back with. So with that, what is the very first book you remember reading?
Oh, very first book I remember reading would probably be Richard Scarry's Busy, Busy World.
All right, that's impressive.
And I read it so much that I have an enduring memory of the duct tape that held the spine together because it just fell apart.
Wow. Okay. That is seriously impressive. Okay. Who is your favorite author, period?
Oh my goodness. Oh, period, ever. Probably the author I've read the most since I was a kid was Tolkien.
Really?
But yeah, yeah. But if I'm
Nice.
gonna talk about my favorite author, like the one whose works just make me sit down and think, it might be Flannery O'Connor.
Okay. All right.
For all of the issues I have with her writing, particularly how she manages some subject matter, the
Mm,
writing itself is so clean. So it's probably a toss up between Flannery O'Connor and Ernest Hemingway,
nice.
because anyone who could write something as clean and beautiful and devastating as Hills Like White Elephants has got to
Mhm.
be towards the top of my list. So yeah, those two.
Very cool. Okay, and who influenced your writing? And that doesn't have to be like an author.
Oh my goodness. So that's actually a really good addendum. Doesn't have to be an author. Oh, let's go with someone who was not a writer who influenced my writing. That'd have to be my mother.
Oh, cool.
That would have to be my mother. My mother would tell stories about family, and with very few exceptions, those stories would always change. And she was never lying. She believed every version of the story that she told me and my sister. And so what I learned from her in that sense, and actually something that I didn't think of until right now,
Mhm.
that I tried to do in the book, was play with the sense of memory. How does memory speak to the present? And what I realized over time was that my mother's version of the story would very much reflect what was happening in the moment. And so that would make
Oh,
perfect sense that this version of the story would be different than the last version, because different things were going on with her and with us the last time we heard the story. So it has to be my mom.
oh my God, I love her. Okay. Which books made the biggest impact on you?
Uh, let's see. I remember the first time in high school I read Flannery O'Connor's The Complete Stories. When I was in graduate school, I read Sandra Cisneros's Woman Hollering Creek and other stories. That was huge. Stephen King's Night Shift woke me
Oh,
up to
yeah.
horror. I loved that book. And then Hemingway short stories also, any of his collections.
Oh, yeah. 100%. Totally. If you could only read one book the rest of your life,
You know what? If I knew that I was going to get stranded on an island, I I I actually don't think that I would take a book. I think that I would end up hating the book that I saved because it would be my only book, and so I think I'd rather live with the memories of the books that I had read in the past.
cool.
I know that's kind of ducking the question, but
No, no. I
I to me that's the special form of hell. Only having access to that one book. I'd rather have access to all the memories of all the books that I'd read before than just be stuck with that one book, no matter how good it is, because I would hate it, and I would hate to hate my favorite book.
All right. Okay. I feel that actually. What do you reread all the time?
I don't reread a lot of books. I tend to cherish the memory of the first time that I experienced it.
Mm.
but I will say, I'll admit that I have reread Cormac McCarthy's The Road
Hmm.
a few times because I just had this feeling that for all of the simplicity of the prose,
Mhm.
despite the fact that he'll like go out of his way to use a word that I've never ever seen before, and so I'm forced to look it up. But other than that, it's very, very simple, straightforward prose. And that's one of the few books where I've gone back through and actually found new meaning because I'm either leaning into it so hard that I have to find something new, or it was there the whole time and I missed it because it was just genius in plain sight and I overlooked it. So I guess Cormac McCarthy's The Road.
Very cool. What book would you save in a book burning?
Uh, so let the first one I could get my hands on, because if it's in a pile of books being
Mm.
burned, I have to assume that each and every one of them has something good to tell me. So whichever one I can save without getting burned, I'm reading that one.
Good answer. And so, what inspired you to write Delivery?
Uh, well, two things. One of them kind of superficial, and the other one, I guess, a little bit more personal. I delivered pizzas in college, and I collected a lot of really, really interesting experiences doing that for 2 years in downtown San Jose. And so I had a lot of people over the years when they would hear one of my stories tell me, dude, you got to write a book. You got to write a book. And so I didn't really want to write a book just recounting my silly old pizza delivery stories. But at the time that I started writing this book, I think I was pretty desperately searching for a place to belong. I needed a sense of community, uh, and I wanted to write a book about somebody who was at a breaking point in their life and they needed to unwittingly realize that they needed to figure out a new way of living or things were not going to go well. And so I set that search in the context of a young person's experience as a pizza delivery driver.
Cool. Who did you allow to read the book as you were writing it?
Almost nobody. I kept it really close to the chest. When I got done with the first draft and realized that, like most first drafts, I was going to need a lot of subsequent drafts, um, I asked a young woman named Cheyenne Austin to take a look at it. Her business is Blue Plume
Mhm.
Blue Plume Editing, and she was very helpful in some of the early drafts and just providing an external perspective on what it was she was reading, and it really helped me get on the right path. So she probably looked at maybe drafts 2, 3, and 4,
Oh,
um, and then fast forward to draft 12, and that would be Peter Wright, um,
cool. Yep.
of Running Wild, and he was instrumental in helping me through the final agony of writing a long book in first person, because it's punishing. First person's punishing, which I love, but first person novel length is rough. And after a while, it's really difficult to figure out how much internality you need to dive into, or should you stay external. And um, he provided a really good perspective for me. So really, it was only people who were helping me with craft that were looking at it. I did not share it deliberately with anyone else. Although, you know what, now that I'm thinking about it, there were maybe 3 or 4 chapters that got published ahead of time. And so maybe anyone who bothered to read those chapters also saw it, but nobody saw the full manuscript except for Cheyenne and Peter.
Understood. Understood. If you were at a dinner party with four seats, what four authors or people would you sit with?
Oh, authors. Um, let's see. Sappho of Lesbos, the poet.
Cool.
I think she'd be really amazing. I remember the first time I was assigned her stuff in high school, and I was thinking, this is it just blew my mind. I couldn't believe that someone so long ago was writing these things. I thought it was amazing.
Mm.
Um, Sticking with the ancient Greek theme, let's see, Lucian of Samosata. He's, I think, second century Greek,
Mm.
and he's credited with writing the first sci-fi book.
Ah,
Um,
cool.
yeah, a true story. And he's also in the introduction to the story, he's also credited with saying, I confidently pronounce that I truthfully lie."
Yes,
It's
I remember that.
what he was saying is that because and I have like the secret passion for travel literature
Mhm.
from the ancient world. It was part of my academic studies. And they would all claim to be telling these true stories of their travels, and it was pretty obvious that they were lying. And but they never said so. They said this is what I experienced. And Lucian was the first one to say, "I'm lying to you, and you're gonna enjoy it because I've just admitted that to you. So just lean back and enjoy." And so that was probably the first time that any writer in the Western world at least tore down that facade of truthfulness and said, "I'm going to tell you lies." And then the beauty of it is that through the lies, he told a greater truth than he could have if he had just said, "This is the truth," and you knew that he was lying. He flipped everything on his head. And so I thought that was pretty cool. So that's two. Um, the Marquis de Sade,
Oh my God, that would be
he'd be a pretty cool dinner guest.
yeah.
And then Nezahualcóyotl, who was the poet king of Texcoco in
Mm.
central Mexico before the Spaniards arrived. He's famous for his love poetry. So, and his poems I've read in translation, are beautiful.
Oh
So
wow.
those four, I think those four would be an interesting mix.
Okay. Yeah.
I have a feeling the Marquis de Sade would steal the show, but still, I think it'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I think so. What is your drug of choice?
Uh, it's probably going to be a tie between caffeine and ibuprofen.
Oh, there you go. What book is your guilty pleasure?
Probably anything by Michael Moorcock,
Oh, interesting.
the writer of the Elric of Melody Bonet and all of the Eternal Champion stuff. I was a huge consumer of his stuff
Mm.
as a teenager, and then a few years ago I reread a couple of books and thought, why did I like these? I don't get it. What was going on with me that I thought that this was cool and okay? But I still get good memories of myself from back then when I read it, and so that's sort of my guilty pleasure.
There you go. What movie or TV show is your guilty pleasure?
Probably my greatest guilty pleasure movie is The Warriors.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I saw it as a kid. I knew so much of it was wrong, just wrong. So much of it is did not age well at all. Even then, even at the tender young age of what, maybe 12, I thought,
Yeah.
oh, this is not okay. But I loved it. I loved it, and I still do. Whenever I see scenes from that movie, I cannot help but watch. So I really enjoy it.
Very cool. Do you read with music or with quiet or some other sound?
I read with quiet. I mean,
If
I
you
can read in a cafe that's noisy too. That's not a problem. But if I have a choice, I'll sit down in a quiet place and read.
if you could ask for one thing to change the world, what would it be?
Ooh, um, I kind of am. I kind of am in love with the idea of waking up one day and there are simply no more guns.
Oh, right.
What
Yeah.
it's just gone. Whether you're a gun fan, whether you're a gun phobe, what would it be like if all of a sudden you just woke up and they did not exist?
Hmm.
What would the changes be? I think it would. I think it would. It's hard to conceive of how different things would be,
Mm.
and I would love if we had the opportunity to see what that would be like.
What does your reading environment look and sound like?
Um, it very much varies. There's a great place here in Boise called Flying M,
Mhm.
and so I'll read there quite a bit. I've read in my car I'll read at the kitchen counter. So it's all over the place. I don't really have one particular spot, but I've probably consumed the most words at Flying M or at the kitchen counter.
Cool. Paper, ebook, or audio?
Paper.
Who would you cast as your main characters and why for delivery?
uh,
All right, that maniacal giggle is probably a bad thing.
there are so many characters.
Well, the primary.
Oh, so I'm just having thought. I thought this out so much. So Daniel, I cannot get out of my head the idea that Xolo Maridueña would play him, and he's one of the leads of Karate Kid.
Mhm.
I think he'd probably need to go to the gym for about 6 weeks, train really hard, but add maybe 10 to 20 pounds of muscle. But he'd be a really good choice, I think.
Mhm.
Yolanda, I can't see anybody playing her but Jenna Ortega.
Hmm.
Um, I cannot get out of my head this delicious idea that Ryan Gosling would play Zane in as smarmy a way as possible. I would love that. And Saoirse, I think, would be super hard and super fun to cast. And I could see like Rain Valdez or um, Carolina Enriquez, maybe.
Hmm.
She'd be hard to cast for, but I think that she'd be probably the linchpin of the cast.
Very, very cool. If you could meet anyone, who would it be and what would you ask them?
Um, I only met my maternal grandfather Jesus once,
Hmm.
and my mother told, as she did, lots of stories about him.
Mhm.
And one of her stories was sort of his origin story, why he left Hidalgo del Parral in the state of Chihuahua in Mexico and came to the U.S.
Mhm.
And the story was usually consistent. The story my mom would tell, yeah, this one was one of the rare consistent stories. And the story that she would tell was that one day his father said, "Mijo, there are too many kids in the house. Um, we need for you to leave. You're the oldest." And he was
Mm.
10 years old.
Wow.
And the story is that he then walked, rode donkeys and mules, trains and trucks, and just headed north and got to El Paso and then took a left and ended up in Flagstaff, Arizona. And I would want to ask him, is that true? Did what did your father really hand you a little bit of money and say, "Mijo, you got to go because we can't feed you anymore"? You know,
Wow.
what made you leave and at that young age, if you were in fact, that young?
Mhm.
So I just kind of what made you do it? Because one thing that is not, I think, in question is that he came very young and he came alone. And
Mm.
so what were the things that led to that? And probably there's nothing too surprising. Probably his poverty, probably his desperation. But I guess I would just like to hear the story from him directly.
Yeah. Wow. Cool. Describe yourself in 5 words.
Oh, um, so okay, I'll have to figure out another word. An early review of delivery gave it a very backhanded compliment. And I sort of took it to heart because I thought, that's sort of, let's say rather immodestly that refers to me, but what the hell, let's go for it. Uh, Unwieldy, but also sometimes brilliant.
Nice.
Often on accident, but what the heck? Let's steal that review and personalize it.
Hey, it works.
I'm not sure. I'd like to think it works, but what the hell? Let's give it a shot. Let's own it.
uh, totally. Now describe your life in 5 words.
My life.
And you can't cop out and say the same answer
No,
as.
I won't. I won't. Um, Always trying to leave love
Ah, cool. Nice.
because we only have a certain amount of time, and if you've left without leaving some kind of love behind, and I feel like that's a life wasted.
Hmm. What was your last guilty pleasure? It could be food, activity, anything.
My last guilty pleasure. Oh, oh, I listened to a Ted Nugent song on the way to work today.
Okay, that's great.
I'm not proud to say it, but I actually enjoyed the song. I had to kind of turn off who he's about and what he's about, but I thought I'll enjoy the song while I'm in my car. But after that, I felt a little guilty.
If you could write yourself into a novel, would you be a hero or a villain and why?
Oh, I think I would want to be a villainous hero. I would want to be that hero that you're pulling for, but you wouldn't mind seeing getting knocked around a bit because he's also kind of an asshole.
Yeah, okay.
You know, you're very conflicted getting behind this person, but ultimately he's on the right side.
Mm. Is there anyone that you dream that you could work with and why?
Whew. Um, oh man, so many. Okay, so trying to stick to the book. I think most people who've written a book are would love to see it on the screen, to see
Mhm.
another interpretation of it. And if that were to ever happen with delivery, because it takes place in a certain environment, I would want it to look like movies that I've admired. And there's a Mexican movie from the early 2000s, maybe 2000, called Amores Perros.
Mhm.
And the director, his name was Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu. Um, I don't know all of his movies, but I know Amores Perros, and the look of that movie, the pace of it, the writing's beautiful, but the way that he made it look in that very gritty environment of Mexico City was just stunning to me. I remember watching it thinking, how did he do this? I know nothing about movie direction, but I appreciate it a lot. And so if delivery were ever to be a visual spectacle, I could see it looking a lot like the movie Amores Perros. And so that director I think would be amazing
Mm.
to if not work with, then to at least, you know, hand over your work to and just let him do whatever the heck he wanted with it.
Very cool. Is there anything? Well, we'll get to that at the end. So, what animal would you run wild with? I did not make up these questions.
Okay. I would I would run wild with a wolf. What the heck?
Yeah. And when was the last time you ran wild? What did you do, and what made it wild?
Um, Sort of, I guess, on that same theme. A few years ago, I live in Boise, Idaho, and if you've ever been to Boise, it's down on the river, but we're right up against the foothills, the Rocky foothills.
Mhm.
And so there's an annual race up at the top of a mountain near that you can see from Boise, right over here, called Bogus Basin. And there's a race up there. It's about a 10-mile race, and I was hurting. I was at probably mile 8, and I was going at a pace that I was not happy with. It was way too fast. And there's a dog running on the trail up ahead of me, and I thought that's really weird. We're pretty far away from civilization. What's a dog doing up here? And I kept running and kept running. And I'm trying to catch this younger guy ahead of me, and I never caught him. But I keep running and I'm catching up to this dog. And as I'm catching up to this dog, I realize that's not a dog, that's a coyote. And it just ran on the trail in front of me for about a mile. Like
Wow.
it wasn't afraid. It wasn't in a hurry to go one way or the other. It just kind of ran with me, and it realized that I was behind it. It kept looking over its shoulder at me, and we just ran for about a mile until finally it just got bored and sort of ran away. So I felt like that was kind of my wild moment. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, absolutely. That I could see why.
Yeah, it
Definitely.
was great. It was a great experience.
So what is on your playlist other than the
Other than
aforementioned?
Ted Nugent. um, Actually, the last song that I was listening to when I got to work, I guess I would call on my playlist. I was listening to some Radiohead, which I was really enjoying.
Not cool. And do you write to music? And if so, what kind?
Yeah, that's so delivery. I wrote to a combination of like late 80s, early 90s rap, and then also um, electronic instrumental music. There was a band called Tangerine Dream,
Mhm.
and I listened to them a lot actually. I just sort of accidentally did it. I listened to them one night and then it got into a play loop, and I realized that I'd written a bunch of chapters to that soundtrack in my head.
Mhm.
So it was either early rap or German techno instrumental music.
Okay. Disney, Universal, Warner Brothers, or other?
Um, I guess I'm going to go with Disney only because there are a few Pixar movies that I really enjoy,
Mm,
and they're technically Disney, I guess. So let's go with that.
okay. Tea or coffee?
Coffee in the morning, tea if I'm having sushi.
Oh, good answer. Appetizers or dessert?
I like savory. I love sweet. I have a sweet tooth, but I like savory before sweet, and so appetizers.
And chocolate or vanilla?
That's like a litmus test. It's like, are you a real person who values life, or are you just a faker? So chocolate, of course.
And is there anything else that you want to share?
Um, just that I hope that anyone who reads the book Delivery is able to enjoy the main character's journey. It might not end up being their journey, but I think that we're all looking for some place to belong,
Mm,
to be able to call home and to say, okay, this may not be perfect, but this is a place that understands me and respects me and that I can be my best person in. And I hope that this book helps people understand that if you just keep searching, you'll find it.
excellent. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you very much.